All right. Welcome back. Hope you guys are doing well. As you can see, I am wearing a Chiefs hat, a Chiefs sweatshirt, and at least I'm a high school basketball jacket. But I was expecting a Chiefs game today. As we know, that is not happening. It's an interesting time we live in, where fortunately, it looks like the Chiefs will get to play tomorrow. I'll see you guys, some of you guys in class tomorrow. But with COVID going on, you kind of feel like anything we get done is pretty lucky in that. So the Chiefs are supposed to play tomorrow. Um, you know, I, hopefully we're here. We're going to see people in person next week with all this going on. And president's currently in the hospital with COVID. So COVID's not going away, but we are trying to deal with it and kind of get through it as best we can, which means you get me on a Sunday afternoon with the Chiefs hat on backwards. So here we are. All right, let me pop that's a little better. All right, so anyway, I hope you're doing well. So today we're going to start talking about the Reformation. Your assignments this week in class all tie to the Reformation. And what we're talking about is the Reformation, or the reforming of the Catholic Church. The Reformation is one of the really important events that take place in the last 500 years, in that it really starts to disrupt the political unity that had been left since the end of since the fall of Rome. The period of time, basically from the fall of Rome all the way through the Reformation, had been largely dictated by the power of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church really originated in Rome and became this unifying factor between all the different groups, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths and the Vandals and the Anglo-Saxons and all the other Germanic tribes, the Franks. Like, all these groups were Catholic, and they were unified throughout all of Western Europe until they weren't. And it's the until they weren't part that we're going to focus on today, which is this Protestant Reformation. So if you look here, it says the main idea is criticism of the Roman Catholic Church led to a religious movement called the Protestant Reformation and brought changes in religion and politics across Europe. The root of that word is protest, Protestant. So those who protested the church are the founders of Protestantism. Okay? And so what we're going to focus on today is the state of Catholicism in the 1400s, and then how Martin Luther, right, the leader of the Protestant Reformation, is going to challenge it, why he's going to challenge it, and then how that begins to spread. And so we'll cover this really over the course of the next 2 weeks. But for today, we're really going to focus on those first two topics as we get started. Okay? So Catholicism in the 1400s, what does that look like? Well, the Roman Catholic Church was influential, but it was also extravagant, very wealthy, and very worldly, meaning that they basically showed off their wealth. Some people felt that the church was straying from its spiritual roots, right? I mean, Jesus was a carpenter, and you had people who were very frustrated by the fact that the church itself was this very opulent, palatial structure that had people wearing the finest robes and covered in jewels and speaking in the name of God. This is all going to kind of crystallize in the Protestant Reformation. And the reason for this is you have significant dissatisfaction because of what appeared to be financial corruption, abuse of power, immorality. You had priests that were supposed to basically take a vow of celibacy, who were not being celibate. They were taking a vow of poverty, and they were certainly not poor. So they weren't really living up to the vows that they had basically promised. And as a result of this, you had people's respect for priests and monks and popes weaken. You also had heavy taxation. The church taxed its people, a tithe. 10%, 20% of their wealth was going directly to the church, meaning the church is really the richest institution in all of Europe in the 1400s, which really upset people. And you got to think what church was like at this point in time. If you were going to a Roman Catholic church in the 1400s, you likely went every week. You sat in the pews and you'd understand a single word that was being said because it was all being spoken in Latin. So it wasn't even spoken in a language that you understood. But you were required each week to give money to the church. What's going to push this over the top is going to be the financing or building of a new basilica in Rome. Pope Leo X approved the sale of indulgences, basically meaning that there were sort of pardons for a soul's time in purgatory. So, if you were to die and go to purgatory, you would be there until a certain penance had been met, and then you could go on to heaven or wherever. Indulgences allowed people on earth to then pay money to the church. The church would then sign over a letter, which then would allow, in theory, for those of your ancestors who had passed away to then skip part of purgatory to go on to heaven because of, well, your money. kind of shady. A lot of people had issues with him. And this is going to be one of the really key elements. The major seller of these was a guy by the name of John Tester, who went around and basically sold them all over Europe. He, made his way through each town, performing miracles and all sorts of stuff, but then basically taking their money. All to build a really, really big church, which exists today, St. Peter's Basilica. Now, this becomes important because, in theory, based upon religious practice, Catholics believe the dead went to purgatory, worked off sins committed, and this sale was widely criticized. And the church often influenced how the government operated in all this, which, made it very powerful, which is problematic. I'm sorry, I'm trying to adjust this. That's where Martin Luther comes in. Martin Luther began to publicly criticize the sale of indulgences, and when he tried to speak to others, they basically told him to stop. And after becoming frustrated by the fact that he wanted to make some changes to the church and what the church was doing, he is going to post a list of these, complaints on the church door at the Wittenberg Church in 1570. In fact, he's going to do it on October 31st, 1517, All Hallows Eve, by just simply making a list of 95 grievances and nailing it to the door. He focuses very much on the selling of indulgences, but also a number of other issues with the church. In this thesis, he says the indulgence had no power to remit sin, criticized the power of Pope, the wealth of the church. And it was written in Latin, not for the common people to read. It was basically a message to the church, but it was very quickly translated through the use of the printing press so that people began to read it. This is going to begin the stimulation of discussion. Nailing the thesis church door was very common practice. Doors were used as community bulletin boards. And these stimulated discussion among university intellectuals. It was published. It was distributed across Europe, widely read by intellectuals, clergy, lay people. And you had this desire for reform to grow. The church, however, does not want that to happen. All right. And so what we're going to talk about this week is really what Luther does and then how the church responds. So we'll stop there for today, and I'll see you guys in class.